How's it going, guys? And in this video, I'm going to be talking about how does a neuron work. And for me, this is something that's super cool because right now you're watching this video and the only reason you're able to see or hear my voice or think about what you're learning is because of neurons doing exactly what we're talking about. So it's a very meta video in a sense. And so this is the star of the show in terms of what's going on inside of a neuron, and that is called a sodium ion channel. Not just any sodium channel, but a voltage gated sodium channel. And so inside of your neurons, basically what they do is they send and receive signals, and that's how we perceive stuff, that's how we think about stuff. And so these voltage gated sodium channels are things that in the resting state of a neuron, so I will write this out right here. This is the resting state of a neuron, are closed. And so what I like to do is draw an analogy here to think of this neuron is a club. And so we've got the walls of our club right here. We've got the cytoplasm, which is the inside of our neuron. And then we've got the outside of the club. And let's say that you're someone who really likes going to clubs and you really want to get in. And so what happens in a neuron in its resting state is that we have a bunch of these sodium ions that are outside of the cytoplasm that really want to get into our neuron. They really want to get into our club. But because of this voltage-gated sodium channel, they can't because there's this door in the way. Or a better analogy is to think of it as there's a bouncer in the way at this door, and that bouncer's name is this inactivation gate. And so what happens right now in a neuron that isn't firing is that this inactivation gate is closed. And so any sodium that really wants to get into this neuron, that really wants to get into our club, can't get into it. And so that's the way things are in this resting state. Now, if things changed, if there was some kind of stimulus that reached what is called a threshold, once we reach this threshold, this voltage-gated sodium channel will have its activation gate swing open. And so I'm going to redraw this, and I apologize if the drawing isn't as perfect as I would like it to be, but basically our door to our club just swung wide open. There's no bouncer anymore. And so because of that, all of the sodium that's on the outside, and I apologize that the screen is moving over the place, but all the sodium that's on the outside is going to come rushing into our cell, into the cytoplasm of our neuron, because it's going down its electrochemical gradient. It's doing exactly what it wants to do. It wants to join this party that's going in our club, and now the doors are wide open. And so there is something that's very interesting and important to note here about what is going on. So these voltage-gated sodium channels that we talked about, these doors that are swinging open, are things that will respond to what the membrane potential is. And so what's happening is we have sodium going into our cell. This is called influx. And as sodium goes into the cell, what's going to happen is that the membrane potential, which we abbreviate VM, will increase. And I'll try to write this legibly. Basically, our membrane potential will increase, and consequently, the more Na plus channels will open. I really should write better. But basically, you're going to get more sodium channels opening. And so in a real cell right now, you're going to have tons of these sodium voltage-gated channels. And so as sodium comes in, more sodium channels open, and because more sodium channels open, you're going to get more sodium coming in, and this is what we call a positive feedback loop. And in these positive feedback loops, you're going to get this thing running away out of control very quickly, and one of the most important things to life is maintaining homeostasis and making sure that we're maintaining things within a given set point. And so positive feedback loops are really scary, bad things. So we need to have some kind of intervention happen right now. And this intervention comes in the form of this player called the inactivation gate. And so the inactivation gate is like another bouncer at our club, but this bouncer is a really strict guy who doesn't care how much money you give him, doesn't care how cool you are. He's going to close this door. And so this inactivation gate is going to come in, and it's this bouncer is basically going to shut this door because he's going to say we cannot have any more of this positive feedback. And so we got to stop this whole process. And because of that, all the sodium that was able to kind of flush into our cell isn't going to be able to, because this bouncer just jumped in the way. And so once this bouncer has jumped in the way, this neuron is now in what is called a inactive or an inactive state. So basically in this inactive state, if I gave this neuron a huge stimulus, it's still not going to care, because this inactivation gate, this bouncer at my club, isn't going to let anybody through that door. Even though my activation gate is open, even though the door is open to my club, because the inactivation gate bouncer is so strict, nothing is going to happen. We're not going to be able to induce another action potential. We're not going to be able to induce a bunch of sodium ions coming in, because we physically have blocked it with this inactivation gate. And so we are now in this inactive state. And so these inactivation states will happen for a set amount of time. And during this time, the neuron is going to start actively pumping sodium. So any sodium that made its way into our club is going to get kicked out through these sodium pumps that use ATP. So we're going to actively move out all this sodium. We're going to make it really interesting and exciting to come back to our club now for the sodium, because the sodium's like, darn, I really want to get back in there, but I just got kicked out. And so during this inactivation state, we're basically restoring the polarization of our neuron to make our club cool again, because we had too much sodium in it. And so that is what happens. And so just kind of recap here in terms of what went on inside of our neuron is that initially we were at this thing called our resting state. And that's when this neuron wasn't firing, and it hadn't fired in a while. And then we moved into this open state, and that's where we had no bouncer and our doors were wide open, and all the sodium that wanted to come into our club could come into our club, and that was fantastic. And then finally what we ended up with was this thing called the inactive state. And during this inactive state is when we had this inactivation gate, our bouncer jump in here to say, no more sodium, you guys are done coming into our club. And we're also going to start actively pumping sodium out so we can get back to our resting state so we can fire again. That's the whole purpose here, is that for us to have a neuron that is repeatable or repeatably excitable to reach its action potential, we need to be able to get back to that resting state. We can't just have this thing be in this open state indefinitely. And so that positive feedback loop that happened, we needed to have this intervention from the inactivation gate in order to stop it. So that is the key thing about how does a neuron work. And these three states are absolutely necessary. It can't just be a binary yes, no. You need to have a resting state, an open state, and an inactive state in order for us to make this repeatable. The final note that I'll make here that I think is very interesting and adds to this discussion is anesthetics. And so if I can spell it correctly, basically with anesthetics, if you ever go to a dentist and you've had surgery, they give you this thing called lidocaine. Lidocaine is a local anesthetic, and I will draw it like this L with a little circle around it. And so basically what lidocaine does is the following. And so lidocaine is like another really, really strict bouncer. So in the same way that our inactivation gate jumped into the picture here, if I had a neuron that was in this open state where inactivation gate's open and activation gate is open, but now our lidocaine is just going to come in here and it's going to sit in this sodium voltage gated channel that we have. Sodium isn't going to be able to come in, and because sodium isn't able to come in, your neuron's not going to be able to reach its action potential. And because your neuron isn't able to reach its action potential, it's not going to be able to tell your brain that you're feeling pain. And so these neurons are called nociceptors. They are specific pain receptors. And so what goes on is they basically will create action potentials that will travel up into your brain to tell you when you feel a sharp pain. Like if you felt a needle going into your arm, that's a nociceptor creating action potentials that are going up to your brain to tell it where you're feeling this pain. But if you had lidocaine jump into this picture on that voltage gated sodium channel and block sodium from coming in, you're blocking that neuron from being able to create the signals to send up to the brain, then you're not going to feel that pain. And so that's what's going on with anesthetics, is that because lidocaine or some other anesthetic is preventing these voltage gated sodium ion channels from working, these neurons cannot send the pain signals, or they cannot send as many pain signals as they otherwise would. And that's the reason why people were able to have surgeries, because we're able to anesthetize people and they're able to bear the pain, or they're just unconscious the whole time. But that is a very important and relevant topic for why you need to know how this stuff works. So I'm going to wrap things up with that. Thank you all for watching. I hope this stuff's interesting. I think it's really cool, and I will talk to you guys next time.